Thanks for checking out another episode of Growing Guelph. In this episode, I sat down with Randy Freese of the Guelph Indigenous Community Council. We talked about identity, community, and decolonization. We explore the roots of the council, their work across Guelph, and what it truly means to belong to a place. Before I wrap up this introduction, if you enjoy Growing Guelph and want to help support local storytelling, I've launched a Patreon. For as little as $1 a month, you can get early, ad-free episodes, you can submit questions for guests, and help shape future topics. It's totally optional, but it always helps keep this project going and growing. You can check it out at patreon.com/growingguelph, and I'll make sure there's a link in the show notes. Thanks for listening and supporting independent local media. And now to my conversation with Randy Freese. Randy, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast this week.
Yeah, no worries.
I'm excited to get into this conversation. I am also, admittedly, like right off the bat, I am ignorant of a lot of, not just the problems, but just Indigenous life in general in terms of Canada. Like I obviously didn't grow up in it. I grew up in Niagara Falls, which I think it has some Indigenous population, but not, like I didn't really know anyone Indigenous growing up or anything like that.
That's a pretty significant history to it, actually.
Yeah. I mean, all of Southern Ontario is a significant history for Indigenous groups in that, right? But I thought, why don't we start things off by kind of getting right into your history. Can you share a little bit about who you are, your background, your nations, and how you came to be in Guelph and involved with the Guelph Indigenous Community Council?
Yeah, no problem. My name's Randy Freese. I'm originally from Alberta, Edmonton, which would be Treaty 6 territory. Mm-hmm. That means I'm Plains Cree, and I'm also Red River Métis, historically. And if you don't know much about that, it's mostly out west. Mm. Red River is current day Winnipeg-ish, area type of thing.
Is that one of the? I know Winnipeg's on like two rivers or something like that. That kind of go through the city.
It's on a couple different rivers. There's the Red River, and there's another one I can't remember the name of at the moment. But there's a huge lake there as well. Mm. Not right in Winnipeg, but outside the city. But yeah, it's lots of waterways across the prairies and through the mountains and stuff. Mm-hmm. So. That being said, like I grew up in Southern Ontario. Okay. I was born in Edmonton, adopted into a white family, and raised, more or less not knowing who I was or where I came from. I was very young when they told me I was adopted, and then we moved to Ontario. So that further disconnected me from any connection that I may have had at the time. Yeah. Being so young. But I grew up down here in the Toronto GTA area. I've lived all over the place since. So I've traveled across this country quite a few times. Shortly after high school, I went back out west and met my birth mother for the first time. And we traveled together for like half a summer. Yeah. And just met all our different family and relatives. So
wow, that must have been, quite the experience for both of you.
Oh,
and your family and things like that. Was that
pretty overwhelming initially?
Yeah,
but yeah, it was pretty cool. I met my mother, my grandmother, and my great grandmother all in the same week.
Oh wow!
And then
I guess you were fortunate enough that so many of those family members were still alive to
exactly.
meet.
And that's the funny story there, because like. My mother and all her siblings were all separated and taken away too. Mm-hmm. So we all kind of fall into that, what they call the 60 scoop generation, if you know what that is. Around the time that residential school started changing into day school or winding down, however you perceive it.
In the 1960s-ish?
Around that time. Like changes came in about 1951, right? Okay. So they kind of changed things a little bit, but instead of making things better, they continued to take us away and distribute us in different ways. And it's such a complicated story, because my mother was only I think she was 3 years old when she got taken away. Wow. And same with her siblings. I don't think she's quite the oldest, but out of 10 siblings, I think 6 of them got taken away. Maybe more, I'm not sure. That's complex story in itself, but my mom spent a lot of her adult life reconnecting with her mother because she's been kind of disconnected. So when I met her, there's this kind of chain that happens where I'm trying to connect with her and she's trying to connect with her mother, and
It's like both of you trying to, in your own way, undo some of the, however you want to describe it, like the sins of colonialism that were done against, like your the families and that, right? That and the people.
Yeah, it's and I say it's complicated just because there's so many different perceptions, I guess you could have of the situation too.
Yeah.
And my mother went through a lot of stuff too, but she kind of has worked through it, and she's a pretty strong woman, independent, still working.
Mm-hmm. Is she's in Southern Ontario? Or she's out.
No, she recently moved to Northern Ontario, so
okay.
We're still pretty far away from each other.
Mm-hmm.
Given the driving distance and stuff. If you've ever driven up north.
Yeah, I'm not that far. Probably not to what people consider, true North Ontario. I did a trip up to. Oh, I'm totally just lost the name of it. The biggest freshwater island in the world.
Manitoulin?
Yeah, I did Manitoulin for the first time this summer, and that was cool. Took the ferry over and then drove the bridge on the way back. That's about as far north as I've been.
Yeah, it's pretty, the roads only go so far, right?
Yeah.
So, like, you can drive as far as you can, and then after that, it's, there's fly-in communities and ice roads in Ontario.
Yeah.
So
Ontario's a big place.
It's a huge place. It's absolutely crazy how big it is because, like, I've driven to Florida faster than across Ontario.
Yeah, it gives you a really good perspective of just why 90% of us are within 50 or 100 kilometers of the U.S. border, right? Like we're all kind of hugging the nicer, not nicer, but the more habitable, more farmland areas and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Which I guess goes back to a lot of the colonialism of it all, where the quote unquote humane decisions that people made at the time was like Indigenous people can't live here, but we'll force them to live in these reserves. And then the reserves were never necessarily in prime territory or prime land, right? It was like, well, we're not going to use this for farming. You guys can live here for this for now.
They're going after all the reserves for all the resources that lie underneath them too, right?
Yeah.
So it's really tricky because they're still in full let's get rid of the mode,
Yeah, and certainly there's a lot of business people at the heart of it who, for them just having to deal with Indigenous groups is probably just like headaches that they don't want to deal with on their path to amassing more money and power.
The most recent bills come into play too, right?
Yeah.
To bypass all that necessary, all the stuff you should be doing appropriately, and just bypassing it to get work done, which I find really bad, and
it's just going to create further problems that people will have to spend lifetimes undoing down the line once again.
Yeah.
So what was, if you don't mind me asking, what was your adoptive parents' reaction to your journey into finding more about your birth mother and exploring your family and that?
Well, initially they were supportive, right? And then I didn't come back for 2 years, right? So it was supposed to be like a summer trip,
right?
I bought a Greyhound bus ticket for 60 days, which was
back when we had Greyhound across.
Had Greyhound, right? So I left July 4th, 2000.
Okay.
Right, and I didn't come back until shortly after 9/11.
Oh wow! Kind of came back to a different world, or a little bit, right?
Yeah, it was a little bit different. Yeah, I was in Vancouver when 9/11 happened, so that was a weird day.
Yeah.
Because it was it's way over there, but it was affected everything, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it was initially they were pretty supportive in me finding my mother. It's kind of a long story, but they don't really talk about it anymore. I think it bothers them a little bit, but what can you do, right? It's something I had to do for myself to kind of move forward with my life in a good way, in a positive way, and I just felt really stuck, not knowing who I was and where I came from. So I had to do this.
Yeah.
Right. So it helped me, and whether or not it they, were kind of stuck in their thinking of it. I'm not really sure how they feel about it nowadays.
Yeah, I guess it's always complex. I'm not a parent myself, but I can imagine you have ideas of your kids and what you want for them in the world, and them going through like radical, maybe just substantial changes is a better way to put it. Like substantial changes as to who they are and how they feel about the world. I can understand that trepidation that might arise where you're just like, oh, but what if they're different? What if they don't think of me in the same way? But I think what's more important is your journey.
I guess in both ways I got pretty lucky because my adopted parents were pretty good parents. They didn't force like religion on me like a lot of people do. And I've heard some horror stories from friends of mine. And going the other way, reconnecting with my birth family, they were totally open and accepting of me and took me in right away and were like overjoyed to hear from me, which.
So you truly did gain an additional family.
Yeah, so now I got like these two families, right? Whereas a lot of adoptees, not necessarily Indigenous adoptees, but adoptees in general, go through that kind of struggle that. What if they don't like me? What if they don't want me? Kind of thing. It's a really hard decision to make. And I got some cousins too that were adopted that had some pretty bad experiences trying to reconnect with their birth families too. So
yeah, especially if there's a lot of like shame and things like that kind of wrapped up in whatever the situation was that led to an adoption circumstances, and can be sometimes uncomfortable unearthing those rocks and finding out what's underneath.
And I think the further you go back too, because I was born in '79, so I think even a few years before me, maybe 10 years even, situations go worse and worse and worse.
Yeah.
Because up until I think it was 1974, the government was actually allowed to sell us. They had classified ads for Indigenous children, which if you can imagine that. It's
I mean. We're often confronted with just things that you would think like, oh, that's hundreds of years ago. It's ancient history. And it's like, it's the mid 70s. Like you could turn on the radio and hear 10 songs from that time period. Like our culture is still very much entwined with.
Well, even residential school.
Yeah.
If the last one didn't close until like 96 or 97. Yeah. Which is insane when you really find that out. If you're only learning that right now. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. I mean, and that's something that admittedly, I have not, haven't done as much research into or just learning about. And I wonder if this is like, maybe this would resonate with some people where it's like I want to learn about those things, but they are also hard, difficult subjects. And there's not like because it's an ongoing issue, right? It's not like learning about, if you wanted to learn about like the War of 1812, it's kind of a settled matter. So you can learn about, it was a settled matter to a point, but as in so much that anything in history actually ends. But with the residential schools and stuff like that, it's just like,
the effects are still being felt.
They're still being felt, and there's, but I guess that's on all of us as Canadians to reckon with the history of our country and what it means. And
I think a lot of people need to come to terms with the truth and accept it, rather than there's still a lot of people that are kind of in denial.
Yeah.
Oh, Canada can't be like that,
People have a hard time holding, you can be optimistic about your country, you can be proud about elements of your country, but that doesn't mean you have to take the whole thing as a unified, I guess it's like with people or with parents or something, right? You can say like, oh, my parents succeeded in this and they do well in this, but that doesn't mean that every single thing they did in their whole life was good or good for us. And Canada is a collection of people over hundreds of years, and a lot of those people were guided by ideologies and things like that we would consider unacceptable today.
And I think not to mention the regional differences too, right? Like it's a huge country.
Yeah.
And when you're only seeing it from like a GTA lens or a Southern Ontario lens, which is kind of the way they teach it in school.
Yeah.
You don't get that bigger colonial picture either, right?
Yeah, and even you don't even really learn I mean, I guess it's tricky to teach this in a history class, but like when I learned about what little like Indigenous history things I did learn about, it was like, oh, here are some of the names of the peoples that lived in southern Ontario, and like a little bit about their lifestyle and things like that. But we never really get into the like what happened to them, what were the big pressures, like, and they're almost too big and too scary to get into in a history class, but then that's the driving force, like the colonialism of it all, right? Like, what were these people trying to do? They had this desire to conquer an entire landmass, and, you know, the people that were there still are there. There will be damned kind of thing, right? Like, well, so how did you become involved with the Guelph Indigenous Community Council, which I understand is fairly new, right?
It's
about
fairly
a
new,
year-ish or so?
It's about a year-ish, you know, a little more. I guess May last year. I'm actually one of the founders. That's how I got involved with it, because we, the Indigenous community in the city was supposed to come together and discuss the matter or a bunch of things with the city itself.
Mm-hmm.
They began this Indigenous relations framework exercise. I think it was last April. They had a couple meetings, and then back in May of last year, they brought us all into City Hall, into like a conference room or something, to meet with us and kind of share ideas and whatnot.
How does that work from the city's perspective? Do they just put the call out, like they're looking to connect with Indigenous people,
Well,
Indigenous voices?
they have a whole department that does like community relations, and they even hired a consultation firm to do this exercise. That being said, like, I don't think it was promoted well enough.
Yeah.
In the first meeting, there was maybe 20 people in the room, and then we left that meeting. It was more like a drop-in night, and I kind of went in there hoping to meet some more people, right? But it was more or less all the people I had met already, with an additional few.
Well, what did that connection look like? Like, how did you, like, I assumed you moved to Guelph at some point, and then what does that look like in terms of meeting other members of the Indigenous community? Like, how do you do that?
Well, for me, it was kind of tough. I moved here in 2017, right, with my family, and I guess for the first couple of years, I was doing the commute from here to Brampton every day. So there wasn't much happening for me in the city.
Yeah, you live in here on weekday, like on weekends, and stuff
and
like
going
that,
to sleep at night. And going, you know what I mean. And the travel time was brutal.
That's one of those hidden costs of like the housing crisis is that when people can't live where they work, and then it makes these people like they're kind of a citizen of one city and they work in another, and they have their foot in both cities, and then they don't feel connected to either one.
I felt like that for a long time anyway, because before we lived here, we lived down in Milton, and the Indigenous community in the Halton region is probably more disconnected than it is here. So, like, I found myself just going back to Toronto, going to Mississauga all the time to connect with community and do programming and stuff like that. And I found the same when I got here as well. There was very little here when I got here. By the time COVID hit, there was even less.
Yeah.
You know, so there was a little bit for a while that I couldn't access because I wasn't here, because I was driving all the time. And then when COVID hit, everything shut down.
Yeah.
And the programming I was able to access was provided by places in the city, in Toronto, Mississauga. So I was doing that online, which, again, wasn't here.
Yeah.
Right? So this kind of recurring theme keeps coming up. And by the time the Indigenous Relations Framework thing started with the city, I had met a few people locally, but not that many. I got together with a local firekeepers group and stuff like that, but not everybody. Like, we're all, because we're urbanized and we live in an urban center, not everybody is from the same nation. We don't have really the same traditions or knowledge or teachings or anything like that, right? So we're all coming from very different backgrounds. You know, luckily I had some of my own knowledge and teachings already from other places around, but again, because I'm from out west, those teachings are slightly different than the ones down here in Southern Ontario, right? So a lot of my teachings and understandings come from this region, where it kind of sets me a little bit off, because I'm not really learning my own people's stuff. I'm learning from people here, which I'm not complaining about. I've been grateful for everything I've learned, right?
Mm-hmm.
But again, all the people I've met, we're all from different places, and not everybody's status, not everybody's Métis. There's a lot of disconnected people in this city,
Yeah.
who have either grown up in care or foster care or been adopted in some way or another. So they're still over a lifetime learning who they are, right? And that's kind of where the Guelph Indigenous Community Council comes in too. Is we're here for those people that don't have that connection to community, or don't carry a status card, and like those people are welcome too, but we're here to help kind of connect people and bring them together. That's the whole purpose of it, was to bring people together, build a community, because a lot of people feel like we don't even have one in this city. And being urban Indigenous is difficult in itself. So trying to connect with people, like-minded people, and grow a community, no matter how big it is, we just wanted to kind of try, try to do something, try to bring people together, and trying to kind of unify our voice. And it would have been better had we done it before these meetings started, right?
Right.
Because that's the one thing that came out of that meeting at City Hall is that we need to organize ourselves a little better. And I was feeling that same way for a long time. So we started the organization. It is a registered nonprofit now, so we're legit, whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been working hard, really, to bring awareness to issues within the city. Been meeting with organizations, people like yourself, grassroots, nonprofit, whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, we were recording. We missed a little bit of that, but hopefully we can kind of reconnect about what we said. I know. So you were talking about the work that the Guelph Indigenous Community Council has been able to do now that you're established as a nonprofit and that within the city. And maybe can you speak a little bit to what are your major goals as an organization, and what sort of resources do you offer to people who are looking to join, and what's the last year of the organization been like?
Yeah, there's been a lot. It's hard to kind of pinpoint every little detail, but we have we spent a great deal of last summer, for example, basically going to meetings all over the city. Yeah. And
like to meet with other groups and that, and just try to figure out.
Yeah, it was more organizations on the settler side of things, I guess, trying to kind of bring awareness and for the most part let them know that we exist both as an organization but as an Indigenous community within the city. Yeah. Because there's a great perception we found where people just think there is no Indians in this city anymore. Yeah. And it's kind of this weird mindset. Oh, you guys exist? It really is. It's funny sometimes, but we have these strange conversations about it sometimes too, because it's like we just disappeared one day and didn't come back, Yeah. So it's like,
well, that's what a lot of the history some of us were taught does sort of imply that, right? Where it's like, oh, people came here and they were looking for places to live, and they just happened to find beautiful land, and they just made use of it. And it kind of there's some history there that's left out of
a lot of it, glossed over at least, right?
So I think something that unfortunately we might have lost in a little bit of the interview there, but maybe we can. You were sort of saying that when you first moved to Guelph, you did some research and some deep dives. Can you? It's okay if you don't know this, like off the top of your head, but can you tell me a little bit about the history of some of Indigenous peoples that have lived in
Well,
this area?
that's
this
one of the
region?
things I didn't find initially.
Yeah.
I found more of the stuff about like John McCrae and different military associations
Yeah.
of people that have come through, like founders of the city type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So when I went looking more, you almost have to go into where the treaties lie and things like that, and find out who was involved in that and how, like with Guelph. It's such a weird place because it kind of butts up against all these different treaty areas.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if any one of them covers Guelph by itself, but they're all kind of against each other, or they crisscross kind of thing.
Does that put Guelph in like a interesting space, or like legally speaking, when it comes to treaties and?
Well, I think it kind of creates like one of our guys on the council. He brings this as an analogy. He says Guelph is kind of like the hole of a donut, because there's all this stuff around us, and Guelph is just kind of this empty space.
Yeah.
And it almost seems the same way when you think about it in terms of the treaty. And there's a really cool app you can go on. I think it's called like nativeland.ca.
Yeah, I think I've heard of that.
Kind of shows all the different treaties and how they intersect with each other and stuff, and traditional territories and language areas and all that. It's really cool. But when you go on there, you get all these different lines, and they kind of go around Guelph. And they don't really cover it, but they're all kind of on the edge. Guelph is kind of like on the edge of a bunch of them.
It's okay if you don't know this, but is that some of that have to do with like those treaties were established when, like prior to the founding of Guelph, like nearly 200 years ago, where it just wasn't considered, like it was an afterthought because they were thinking of other communities and things like that?
I'm not sure, not necessarily. It's a good question, actually. I'm not entirely sure, but there is, they made these treaties, whether it was in good faith or not, and the whole purpose of the practice was to get us out of the way, right? So they could settle the land, and I think there was probably settlements here and there, scattered around. I'm not sure how far back. I guess if they're saying Guelph is almost 200 years old, that's older than Canada itself. And I've heard some history stories where, John A. Macdonald himself has associations right here in this city.
Yeah.
So like there's a lot of different and or conflicting histories, within this city, and it's kind of funny because you go to events and things like that because we're a nonprofit. We go to AGMs and stuff like that for other organizations and things, and they always do this land acknowledgement, right? So we acknowledge this and this, but I always wonder if they even know what they're talking about, if they're just reading a script or not, because if they knew what they were talking about, and I don't mean to kind of shit on everybody, but sometimes it seems performative.
A little disingenuous.
Yeah,
a
it
little
doesn't
like,
seem
we've added
very
this to the
genuine.
list of things you have to do to perform. Like you said, performative, right?
It's a little performative, and it would be nice. And I have heard some very genuine ones that come from the heart and a personal level, and I like those ones. But it's the ones where I see people literally reading off a script. They can't pronounce the names. They don't know what they're saying. They're just reading it because they were told to.
Yeah.
Right? And it doesn't mean anything to them. So they don't really know what they're saying. And it's kind of like the apology from the government. They think that's all we need to do now. Everything's good. Whereas more like that's the beginning.
Right.
But yeah, it's a tricky one. I can't remember your question.
It was. Oh, what was my question? Well, I guess it was around the Indigenous peoples that have lived in this region and that.
Right,
but I did think of another question just as you were talking about land acknowledgements, and throughout your life you've seen the changes with even with regards to language, like how accepted ways of talking about Indigenous people and things like that. what does that mean to you, like as a person who's Indigenous and also had that like discovery of your Indigenous background
Right.
throughout your life? Like,
Yeah.
do you see us making, like, is some of those changes to language, for example, is it just sort of meaningless performance, or is there real reckoning and benefit to that? Like,
Yeah, I can see what you're saying, and I think really on a case by case, person by person basis, it really has to come from the heart, in some way or another. You got to want to know, you want to learn, do that work, right, to figure out, the truths that need to be learned and whatnot, because we're another aspect of reconciliation, I guess, and some of the work that we're doing as the Guelph Indigenous Community Council is trying to instill these values where we're not only doing reconciliation work and trying to find those truths and, just maintain the fact that we exist and we are here, but the decolonialization, if I can say that word properly, there's a lot of work there to be done.
yeah.
And there's several organizations in the city that have made the commitment to decolonize. And that doesn't mean necessarily like shutting down and moving out and giving us the land back, right? Changing your language, speaking to us appropriately, including us in the conversation. That can go a long way to maintaining and building relationships, right? And a lot of people, I think, have started doing stuff like that, or doing the work to get better at that, do better, and be better at I know it's complicated and it's hard. It's not, nobody said it's going to be easy, right?
Yeah.
Decolonizing your language, for one thing, is a challenge, especially even for us, right? Because we're constantly faced with the, we have to walk in these two worlds, is the way we put it, because we are reconnecting with our indigeneity on one side of things, but we still live in this society, either an urban setting or, just the colonial land it is, right? The country itself, right? We have to live by the laws and all that stuff, and it's kind of balancing everything all at the same time.
It's also like, I can imagine Indigenous groups, like, you want to learn about your authentic culture and whatever that means, but there's no one living today that has I don't want to say true connection, but to a connection to that Indigenous culture that isn't entirely colored by the relationship with the colonial powers.
Right.
So it's like cultures that have truly gone through, like, I mean, one, like, an apocalypse of loss of culture and people, and like just actual people who were killed either through disease or systematic, like, purposeful killings. And then that entire time trying to more or less erase you from some of the history books and things like that, and just rewrite how things went down. So, yeah, I mean, I think the word reconciliation does a lot of, like, there's so much in behind that, and I guess it's a good thing that it's an active verb and not like there really is no end point to it, right? Because how could there be an end point when it's been hundreds of years of...
Yeah, it's not going to happen overnight, right?
Exactly. And like, what would it even look like to be reconciled?
Yeah.
Like, it's... I don't think we know, and we probably shouldn't know, because we're just still kind of in the process of reckoning and understanding. And, it makes sense that this should be challenging and difficult and messy, because it was a incredibly challenging, difficult, and messy ordeal that, like, on the way here, right? It was a whole lot of individual and systemic actions that led to this, so it's going to take hundreds of years
generations,
of... Exactly.
For sure. Yeah.
Can you maybe describe a little bit about the internal processes and that of Do you abbreviate it to GICC?
We do.
Yeah.
In conversation, I guess.
Okay.
And just to be quick sometimes, but because we're doing an interview,
Yeah. I'll say it's
give the context of
the Guelph.
Guelph Indigenous Community Council.
Yeah.
And so you know what it is.
Yeah.
The short form, GICC.
Well, they're already a good, decent ways into this this conversation. So, but yeah, so can you kind of walk through a little bit about how the GICC engages with different Indigenous populations and also with the non-Indigenous community members and institutions, and like maybe how have you figured out a little bit of what that cadence and that looks like?
We have tried to focus locally, more so than anything else, I think. When it comes to individual people, it's just kind of like a Facebook message or something. We have a mailing list for people. We do have a website. People have reached out here and there. Not all of them are Indigenous. There's just several allies and people like that. So, there's nothing wrong with being an ally. We're happy to know you, and the fact that you want to be an ally is a good thing too, right? And then in terms of organizations, it's kind of hit or miss, but we have been able to build some lasting relationships over the last year or so, and because I'm also part of a few boards and committees here and there around the city on different charitables and whatnot, so that has helped me connect with them as well. So there's a few organizations, both like we've gone through some healthcare organizations like the Guelph Community Health Center for one. We've talked to the hospital people on the hospital board. We've talked to some of these acronyms drive me nuts because it's so hard to remember the actual
people
names of them, right?
The funniest is when there's an organization that's so used to the acronym that they don't even spell out their full organization name on their website. They're just like, here's the acronym, and then they just keep using it, and you're like, please, like I know you use this all day long, but help.
And that's why I made that point earlier about us using the long name of it too, because especially when you got Guelph in your name. Here's another Guelph organization with an acronym, right? So we're constantly trying to remember which one's which. But a lot of them are actually affiliated with each other. We've connected with quite a few people who just want to do better work with, Indigenous folks and connect with the community, help in any way they can. And some organizations also have Indigenous relations committees or some variation of that, right? So those people will have actually reached out to us at times too, and we will connect, and we'll either sit down and have a meeting, go back and forth on email for a while before we can kind of meet in person. Sometimes it works out. Sometimes it takes a while, but for the most part, I think we've done some pretty decent work at connecting with people and bringing awareness to who we are. And that includes yourself. Like, we have the Instagram. We just kind of retooled our social media, changes to our website a little bit, just adding some information. We had some internal stuff happen in the late fall where we had to make some changes. We had to vote one of our members out of the council and stuff like that. But since that time, things have really kind of ramped up.
Yeah,
we have had in June alone. We were at the Multicultural Festival. We were invited to July 1st, and there is a Indigenous Day celebration. All those things were at Riverside. So we have a nice little booth that we provide some information. We have conversations and things like that with people that just walking by. What's the Indigenous Council? And one guy comes up and he's like, "There's an Indigenous community in Guelph." We get a lot of that.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, some conversations can be dead serious. Some are playful. We try to be friendly.
Yeah.
And kind of open-minded to having conversations. And for the most part, it's been okay. There has been, the haters and things like that. But what are you going to do, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's if you're trying to form any kind of group, you're gonna get that sort of backlash, and there's a lot of emotions tied up with this. I mean, I couldn't help but notice over the last couple of weeks, someone has graffitied. There's like a plaque, right? It's downtown. It's like a pillar of the train bridge that goes over by downtown Guelph, and there's a plaque there that says, "On this spot is where John Galt, I think his name was, he chopped down a tree, and that was like part of the founding of Guelph. And there's a little plaque there, and someone has graffitied. I forget exactly what it says. Something about like colonizers. It calls them colonizers, and maybe it uses some colorful language. I forget, but so like clearly like the ramifications of those colonizers and those people and their choices, and that it's still like living people, like we're still reckoning with that and trying to move forward. And I mean, there's some willingness for people to correct or course correct in whatever way that means, but there's also so much momentum of like not disrupting the status quo, right? Like not disrupting the businesses that are so I mean, what are your thoughts on, I guess, both Guelph and just the nation in general? Like, are you hopeful that we're moving in the right direction in whatever way that means, or
yeah, yes and no, I guess. I have seen good things and bad.
Yeah.
Some progress here and there. And I think another way to look at it too is, you and me were both educated, I would guess, about the same time period in schools and stuff. Mm-hmm. And I think as people kind of awaken to this fact that we're not being taught the right information, mm-hmm. we are going to look for it. And I think younger people are getting better at that. They want to know the truth.
Yeah.
How is my education the exact same as what my son's getting today?
Right.
When I was educated like 30 years ago or whatever, right? And it's kind of like, how has nothing changed in the education system in that much time? And I think young people are getting pretty fed up with being fed these lies that they're in propaganda and stuff like that,
Yeah. You don't have to. The amount of digging and that, like the accessibility to the information, it's just at people's fingertips, and that's like a lot of people talk about. As bad as social media and things like that have been for us, it's also been very illuminating. Mm-hmm. To you can open up your phone and see into someone else's world and get their voice directly from them to you. Yeah. And granted, there's algorithms and all these other things that have a twist and a sway in who you're seeing and whatnot, but there is still something to be said that like you can, now more than ever, you have access to a wide variety of people's voices and those histories. And the downside is that there's also access to the misinformation and for, I don't want to say it's equal, but for every person who wants to explore more and be connected with the true history of what happened, there's other people there feeding them a different version of that true history, quote unquote true history.
Well, that's I guess the thing too is with the internet and social media and whatnot, you can see and find all the different perspectives. You're not forced to just see the one. Where I think, especially in my youth, I think that's all we were kind of seeing is one-sided news, right?
Some people miss that, I think. They miss the simplicity of it, right? Because it felt like everyone read the same newspapers, watched the same news, and there was this like cultural agreement, and you could be countercultural, but it was like those two options. And now it's like everyone is getting their own curated sense of how the world is, and then everyone's like butting heads at each other. But
I think even with that, there's going to be conflict no matter what in some way, because you got the denialism of things still,
Yeah.
right? And then you got the people that are actually finding out the real truth, and it's kind of like when they meet in the middle, what are you going to do? Is it going to be an argument or a conversation, right? And I think conversations need to happen more productively at times. You can disagree on things. It can happen a lot. It happens every day, right? But at the same time, you have to be able to hear each other.
Yeah. And I mean, that is a benefit of this medium with podcasting, where you and I can just sit down and, I can lay it out to you like, hey, I don't know a lot of things, but I'm interested in learning. And then I can ask my questions to you, and people can kind of see that unfolding in real time, which I think is a little bit more helpful for people than other forms of media. Just kind of wrap things up in a way where it's very, like, there's a lot of production to it, and you get like a sanitized version of it versus like these sort of conversations are difficult. And I think, people just feel very paralyzed. I think there's a lot of well-meaning people that, maybe some of the same people that you've seen give half-hearted land acknowledgements and stuff like that, where like they want to do the right thing, but they're mostly driven by a fear of doing the wrong thing.
Yeah.
So then that's where you get people who are like, okay, well, we have to check all these boxes, but they're just doing it to like, oh, hey, we will cover our ass if we acknowledge the right people and say this and say that and thank this person and thank that, then no one can accuse us of anything. But that's just, in some ways, kind of maintaining the status quo, right? Because you're like, okay, there's a new thing, we land acknowledge, and then we move like...
There's a lot of that, I find, in Guelph specifically, is maintaining the status quo.
Yeah.
And one thing we have found with the GICC is that people are very afraid to do the wrong thing or make a mistake. So they'll just take people at their word, right? Without proof or documentation of any kind. It's just like, I am who I say I am, and if you don't believe me, I'm going to sue you. Can't even question them, right? And it's kind of like...
I guess that gets into interesting things too, right? Because you're right. People don't want to be seen as the, like, for example, the white person saying like, hey, like, prove to me your Indigenous background, prove to me about this claim, because that gets into messy territory. So you're right. You get people who are just like, okay. And then that does put the onus on other members of the Indigenous community to then, I wish there was a better word other than police, but like police themselves, right? Or
there is processes to verifying people.
Yeah.
And, in a lot of ways, leaving it up to us is one way to do it. But at the same time, we don't always get along with each other either.
Yeah.
Right? And
that's
how
the thing,
we
like
do
you're not one people.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Colonialism has forced you to be reckoned with as like one person, well, not one person, one people and one group, but like there was a multitude of nations and languages and people and backgrounds and ways of life here. It got kind of all squashed
even
together.
with our name, the Guelph Indigenous Community Council, we talked and discussed that term Indigenous for days.
Yeah.
Because, within the context of being in Canada, we're talking about First Nations, Métis, and Inuit for the most part, right? But we left it as Indigenous to include Indigenous folks who, may come. For one example, is one of our guys is from Texas. He's an Apache guy that has Mexican roots too, right?
Right.
So that, he's Indigenous, but he's not from Canada, right? That Indigenous terminology can be troublesome at times as well, right? Because it starts making people think, oh, I'm Indigenous to wherever in the world, right?
Yeah.
Which not necessarily is wrong. It's not wrong because people are Indigenous to other places in the world. But as a council ourselves in this city, we were predominantly focused on bringing the Indigenous people of North America together.
Yeah.
Turtle Island, I guess you could call it, because that's one way we call it sometimes, right?
Yeah.
So,
as
we transcend borders, right? we were here long before the borders were. And there's that thing where the border crossed us. We didn't, type of thing.
Yeah.
Because
Artificial lines, well, I won't say artificial, that's a kind of a Trump line now, but the lines were imposed on people that were here, and then they were told, like, hey, now you're this. And they said, according to who? Like,
even when you go back, even to, 1812, like you said earlier, we weren't Canada yet.
Yeah.
Right? So it kind of, it gets tricky when you're trying to talk about this country as a country, because the further back you go, the less of it really is this country as as we see it now, right?
Yeah, I've seen a little bit of that. Right now we're in a period of very focused on nations and nationality and stuff like that. But if you go back, pre 20th century, like in the 19th century, people often thought about cities and states were a little bit more important. Yeah. So someone from Toronto might identify themselves more as like, hey, I'm a citizen of Toronto, and they might think of like moving, and they wouldn't think of it as like, I'm moving to the United States. They might just think like, no, I'm going to move to Chicago.
Right.
And I mean, certainly Canada there's a lot of cities that are very close on either side of the border, and they probably have a lot more similarities than they do differences.
Yeah. Especially around the Great Lakes, I think you have all these different cities that, they're both sides of the border, very different, groups of people in them, but they have a lot in common because of where they stand and the relation to that area.
Yeah. Ways of life and just dealing with the weather in the region. Like, you could argue a lot of people in Michigan probably have a lot more similarities to people in Southern Ontario than either of them do to people in Edmonton.
Yeah, well, the climate for one is vastly different.
I spent some time out west in like Banff and Calgary and that like 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago now, and it was a silly thing, but like I just never appreciated that being someplace like an incredibly dry climate just changes everything. Yeah. My hair felt different, and like my skin felt different, and I was missing the trees, and it was weird just how different. Like, I'm still in Canada, but it felt very alien to me. It didn't feel like home.
It's definitely a change, and you have to get used to it too. Yeah. Even I've lived in 4 different provinces, and I guess 3 of them are out west, but even BC to Alberta. Yeah. Because that, this one climate, and that's a different climate. We're like a sea coast in Vancouver.
What side of the mountains you're on there makes a big difference.
It's a big difference, yeah. Once you cross the mountains into Alberta, it gets really dry, and the winters are different than they are here. Yeah. Right? All that stuff. It's such a big country, and there's very different climates all across it. And it's a really cool place to visit if you ever get a chance. Mm-hmm. I've been to 9 out of the 10 provinces and 1 of the territories so far, and I hope to see the rest of it. But you can spend half your life just exploring one. Yeah.
Just Southern Ontario is enough space, and even just the little part here that
a lot of people never get out of this area too, right?
Yeah, that's fair. Well, I guess speaking of other countries, in the efforts of, I guess I could say, like, your group is playing its part in terms of reconciliation and what that means, has there been efforts to look at what other countries have done and, like, their own conversations around this topic and things like that, just to... whether it's to emulate them or to just sort of learn or take note of that? Like, have you explored anything like that? Because I know there's other colonial countries like Australia and things like that.
When you're speaking on the bigger term of colonialization, it the conversation gets a lot bigger. Yeah. Because even with this past weekend, being August 1st long weekend, it's also known as Emancipation Day. within the British Empire. So that doesn't just include Canada, right? That includes any country in the world that was colonized by the Britain,
Yeah.
right? So you have a lot of variation in that itself, right? The countries that Britain colonized worldwide is incredibly different, like so many different places.
Yeah,
Right?
and they all have a different relationship with Britain, right? Like you could look at Irish people have their own very unique history with the British Empire, as does India, as does Australia, as does Canada. Like
exactly right.
It was
Then you got like half a dozen Caribbean islands, I think. Like so many places in the world that were colonized by this one empire. How they were an empire when their country's like this big on the map.
They themselves were. I don't know if you'd use the word colonized, but they were.
They were
taken over by an empire at a
over
previous
and over
time.
again, right?
Yeah.
Over thousands of years, too, right?
Yeah, the Romans came into them and imposed things upon them, and
I think a lot of Europeans need to come to that realization with themselves as well, that you might be white in North America, but when you go back to Europe at some point in your life to visit, whatever, you're going to realize that you're not.
Yeah.
And you really got to come to terms with that, because, colonization has, in a lot of ways devastated that region over and over and over and over and over again over time. But it's also brought it to where it is now, right? So it's kind of hard to say, like, I'm indigenous from here, but it's kind of, when you say indigenous from somewhere in the European region, you're probably indigenous from some kind of culture that predates any of those countries that you currently see on the map. Right?
Yeah, and the more you look into that, the more kind of fascinating it is, right?
Yeah, it's really, really complicated.
A citizen of France might be able to say, like, oh, I can trace, like, I'm a Frenchman on both sides of my family for X number of years. Yeah. Like, well, what does that even mean? Because, like, France isn't a eternal place that's always existed. It used to be a bunch of different individual people, and they all would have been very adamant about they were from this part of France and not this part, and this part and not this part. And in some ways, a lot of human history is a lot of people either being assimilated by the groups next to them or drawing a line in the sand and saying, like,
people
this
evolve
is what...
too, right? So it's kind of like different groups merge at times and become something new. Right?
You get into the prehistory of it all, that there's been... It's a long, messy past that we have as people. And what is that, like... Maybe this means different things to different people, but what does, like, being Canadian mean to you as a person?
Are you asking?
Yeah, like what does that mean to you?
Oh, I have that has changed a lot over time.
Yeah,
especially the way I grew up and what I've learned about myself over time. So it's, I used to be this kid who played hockey and all that stuff, and this is Canada, blah blah blah, and it wasn't necessarily a pride or anything, but I guess in my more oblivious days, Canada, yay, whatever, I'm happy kind of thing to be here.
Yeah.
And more often these days, I find myself questioning whether or not I even want to be here sometimes.
Yeah.
But at the same time, in a lot of ways, we are still very lucky to be here.
Yeah.
Right. And then the indigenous side kind of starts questioning everything else I'm saying to myself. Like, it's an attack on myself internally, right?
Right.
It's like are you really Canadian? But like it's hard.
Yeah.
It's a big question to answer, because it just kind of, if you can let the past go, like they say, just let it go, right? And that's hard to do in itself.
Yeah.
Right. So it's kind of like, sure, I live in Canada. But at the same time, it's kind of like, I'm also indigenous, and this, and this, and this, and this has happened to my family throughout time, and it becomes this big question of, oh man, I don't even know how to answer the question, because it's difficult for me.
I mean, I think you did a good job of just, like, reckoning with the complexity of that question, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it might be, easier to say, like, well, what does it mean to be a Guelphite?
Yeah.
And like that's a little easier because there's at least there's less of a ideology wrapped up with it. Like you're just a Guelphite by definition by living in Guelph. And then what Guelph does as a culture and things like that can be shaped and pushed and like is a conversation being had by many people. And I guess the same thing is true of Canada, but
just on a bigger picture, I guess, right?
Yeah, and a lot
Bigger
more
scale.
voices with a lot different concerns and the things that matter to us here in Southern Ontario. I mean, we kind of see this right now. There's some portion of Alberta that is feeling like they are less enthusiastic about the project of the Dominion of Canada, and they're a little bit more like,
Alberta's a funny place like that, though. They, I don't know. Like I'm from Alberta.
Yeah, do you?
It's kind of like
That must give you some interesting perspective of where they're coming from with that, right? Like, do you empathize a little bit?
not really, because I'm also Indigenous from Alberta.
Right.
They have no ground to stand on.
It must be a
when
little
it comes
bit
to
ironic
separation,
for them to say, like,
Yeah.
you know, you hear white people saying things like, they're imposing their will upon us, and they're doing this and they're doing that, and it's like, well,
there's always this this rivalry. I prefer to call it than kind of hate, because you go, I'm from Toronto, in Edmonton, and I go, you kind of thing.
but you
right?
say you're from Edmonton and Calgary.
Yeah, the same thing. If you say I'm from Calgary and Edmonton, or the vice versa, right, you get the same kind of thing.
And even within a city, it's true, right? We're like, oh, you're from that side of town? Well,
when I moved to Vancouver, I had this conversation on a city bus with one lady. She kind of started talking to me. She said, "Oh, I moved here from Toronto. I love this place so much. I hate Toronto. I hate it.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sitting right next to you, and I'm from Toronto. At the same time, I'm just kind of thinking, like, okay, nice to meet you.
People just also
they make assumptions. They
make
I was from
assumptions.
there.
They only know what they've experienced and what they've been told about.
Yeah.
I think about that too, where sometimes people they live in the country and their experience of Toronto is like going to a Blue Jays game, and you experience a very small slice of the city when you do that.
Yeah.
And they go there and they think like, oh God, how do people live in all of this? And this like, and it's like, well, the neighborhoods outside or around the city don't all look like right outside like the Rogers Center or whatever, right? Like Toronto's a big place and there's a lot of different looks and feels to what it means to be there. But then there's also people who just say like, hey, I'm used to my neighbor being like 2 kilometers that way. And they might never feel comfortable being like in a condo building or something, right? Because to them, it's just such an alien way of living.
But a lot of people, even from out of town, their experience of Southern Ontario is the 401 from the airport.
Yes.
And once they do that, they're like, I'm never coming back here.
My wife experiences this all the time, where she's from little town of Linden, Ontario, which is technically part of Hamilton.
Oh, okay.
But it's like the countryside of Hamilton.
Yeah.
So when she tells people, oh, I'm from Hamilton, some people, their only experience of Hamilton is the highway, and you go through it. So they hear Hamilton and they think like giant factories. Like,
Yeah.
And
One
it's like,
little edge of it, right?
yeah, it's like, well, you're just seeing like a tiny slice of it. Like Hamilton's a big place.
Yeah.
There's golf courses and countrysides and little small like dense communities, and there's a lot to it.
Mm-hmm.
So, but what do you maybe speak to, like, what are the ways that if you and the Guelph Indigenous Community Council are successful, what are the ways in which that you would hope to see changes that you've made? Like, are there aspirations that you and the other like founders of the group have in terms of what you're hoping to establish in Guelph, and like what are your goals there?
Yeah, I guess one thing I can tell you about is like one thing we really wanted to try to get is a space for us.
Yeah.
The indigenous people of the city didn't really have anywhere to go for the longest time. And most recently, they were kind of the St. Joseph's Healthcare Center up on Westmount there have kind of offered a space, like a small room, to do what we want with.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just for the Guelph Indigenous Community Council, but the Indigenous community at large, right? They have allowed us to use this space. And for the last couple months, we started doing an Indigenous men's sharing group.
Mm-hmm.
So once a month so far, we have gotten together. The turnout hasn't been great yet, but we're trying to get the word out and stuff like that. And we get together on a monthly basis and just kind of sit around and share stories and talk about issues and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not necessarily a GICC thing, but we did kind of start it and suggest it. And one thing as a council we are trying to do is initiate more programming like that around the city, or like kind of like bring stuff back to the city, local maybe events or gatherings of some kind.
Well, it's interesting, like earlier we were talking about how challenging reconciliation can be because there's that momentum of hundreds of years of colonial powers.
Right.
And you're sort of seeing, or your group is dealing with the opposite of that, where your voices have been silenced for so long that now just getting that momentum going could be, it could be like a lifetime project for all of you to just get the awareness out there, get the...
And I have no intention of stopping, honestly. It's whether or not we are considered successful is kind of in the eyes of us, I guess, right? And, but the work has to be done. And, the one thing I tell people is, like, I'm not doing it for myself. I'm doing it for my son, I'm doing it for those who come after him.
Yeah.
So there's this the thing I really try to enforce with people, or just kind of convey the message of, is just to think beyond ourselves.
Yeah.
Right. Next generation and beyond type of thing. Because if we don't do that, we're going to be kind of stuck in the status quo.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
You have to... I forget what the exact quote, but there's some sort of quote that's like, society is people planting gardens that they'll never get to enjoy,
Right.
planting trees that they won't be able to enjoy the shade of, but they'll know that they're continuing the work that their children or children's children or things will get to enjoy. I guess having a physical space would be really important because, as so many people learned during the pandemic, there's only so much you can do online, and online is like kind of neat, and it has its purposes and it has its uses and that, but it's no substitute for gathering in person and sharing, right?
Yeah, it helps to that interaction in person, or it doesn't necessarily have to be a space indoors either, right?
Yeah.
If we had a space where we could go outside, like a garden or just a land base of some kind, to learn and just gather and enjoy the outdoors together, kind of thing, that would be another thing entirely. What we have at the moment is a good start, not necessarily the be all end all of solutions, but they have been really open minded with us.
Yeah.
Have been turned into a pretty good partner for us as well.
Who's that in particular?
The St. Joseph's Healthcare Center over there on the Westmount. They've been really good with us. The people have the ones we have interacted with. I guess I'm not sure what their position is in the organization, but they've been really good with us. All we got to do is book the space, and we're able to use it almost whenever. I don't know if it's 24/7 or not, but not that we need it like that. But it's been pretty flexible, and it's been beneficial, especially for beginning to put programming out. Even tomorrow night, one of our guys, he's our youth leader in the council. His name is Nate. He has put together a youth group, and he's trying to start it up in that space as well on
that's cool.
Friday nights. So it should be something new, something to attract younger people.
Yeah.
You know, so like programming is a big deal for us. Local stuff, maybe events or other kind of programming, things that we can do to get together, gatherings, whatever it might be. We just want to be able to have a place to go, or at least have people to connect with each other, so they can do that, and just have a sense of community at some point, you know. Because that's one thing that's really important, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think I said this before the mics were on, but that's sort of why I wanted to start this podcast. Was like, I moved back to Guelph at the height of the pandemic.
Oh, okay.
And it was like I'd gone to school here before, but coming back, it felt like there was, it was just hard to, like, how do you make friends and meet people when, like, we all had to social distance from each other?
Right.
And even then, since then, like, restrictions have lifted and things like that, but it clearly did a real number on our willingness and ability to connect. And it's almost like people are so into their phones and into this big national conversation that it can be easy to lose that connection to your city.
Yeah.
And but like, your city is where you live and where maybe you work and maybe kids go to school, and there's just so much of our lives are governed by like municipal governments and things like that, but people don't really care because it's not as interesting as what's happening nationally or internationally.
Yeah. You could even argue that sometimes, I think, because I think municipal stuff can be more interesting if you take an interest in it.
Yes,
Yeah.
I mean, that's the caveat, right? And I get it. Like, when I was younger, I couldn't really have cared less about municipal politics and things like that. Like, even the idea of wanting to care, it would be like, oh, but why? Don't you know that there's all this interesting stuff happening? And it's, but I think there is interest in Guelph, and my experience with Guelph has been a lot of compassionate, caring people, a lot of educated people, and there is a lot of energy in that of wanting to care and put voices up and put the spotlight on things that people care about and things like that. So I hope your group can benefit from some of that.
I think so, and I think we kind of have already, in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
And when you approach things with a certain mindset, whatever, positive or, just in a good way, like just you want to accomplish something or, build those relationships, make that connection. I think that's where we have had some success already. And it's not about, getting handouts or, give me money or whatever. It's not really what we're after. It's more about the relationship building at the moment. Like it's really something that's been important for us.
Yeah.
If we don't do that initially, we won't get anywhere anyway, I think.
Yeah, and just that representation, like, it's obviously the reconciliation, it's such a big topic on the national level, so it deserves its place in our municipal government, and like how people talk about city and how people, like, how the future of Guelph is being shaped.
Yeah.
So for people who are interested, where can they find out more about what you do and future events that you might have?
Yeah, we have a Facebook group. We are on Instagram as well, which is, I believe, where you found us. Our website is gindigenous.cc.org. It's kind of complicated, but it's just Guelph Indigenous Community Council.
It'll be a link in the show notes if anyone wants to go explore right now.
Those three things, and we have within the website, there's a couple different ways to contact us, join a mailing list and whatnot. And we've been working pretty hard at, behind the scenes type of things, kind of putting things together, organizing those databases to help, connect people with whatever newsletters and postings and things like that. So, like one thing that got away from me last month is posting. I make a flyer every month for the men's circle, and I sent it out a couple times, but I didn't mail it out to everybody. I just didn't have time, and it affected it because 3 people showed up. So we kind of have to keep our eye on those things.
It's such a challenge in the modern world because there's we're all inundated with everyone's email inbox is just full of crap, and their physical mailboxes are full of crap. And it's like every time we invent a new way of communicating with each other, the marketing, and I say this as someone who's worked in marketing, the marketers ruin it for them, right? Like our phones are almost unusable because of spam calls, and the internet's almost unusable because of AI slop and stuff like that. So
the one challenge that we have, I don't know if it's specific to the Indigenous community or not, but I know several people who don't do email. They don't do social media, and they're not all the same people. So you get these little clumps of people who don't do one thing, don't do this, or don't do that. So you have to kind of send it out different ways in order to reach everybody, or just pick up the damn phone. Hey, this thing's happening, right?
Well, it does create like you were saying about the hard work that goes on behind the scenes, like those databases and that admin work. It's a little bit thankless work, but it's so necessary for any kind of community that wants to, or group that wants to establish a community.
Well, even with being a registered nonprofit now, and we have gone through our first year. So right now we are planning for our own initial AGM, which is kind of mandatory when you get registered like that, right? And part of that process, I had to do the bookkeeping, and because we didn't have a bank account for the last year, we finally got that set up, right? So there's all these little tiny details that are a real pain in the ass sometimes. But it's necessary to get on that, accountability page too, right? Because you can't really take in donations if you don't have a proper place to put it. You can't just go into my pockets kind of thing, right? You have to be accountable to the community and to those people who donate, right?
And it adds legitimacy to everything your group does. But it's hard to establish that legitimacy from nothing.
From nothing, exactly.
Yeah. Well, Randy, I really appreciate you sitting down, speaking to me about this. I feel like there's still a world of knowledge that I still need to uncover about indigenous peoples of Guelph and beyond. But thanks so much for taking some time to talk about what you do.
I appreciate you having me and reaching out and all that stuff. It's great to meet you, and I appreciate the time.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for listening to Growing Guelph. I've been your host, Jordan Sloggett. Be sure to subscribe to us on social media, on your favorite podcast app, and if you have a recommendation for a future guest you'd like me to speak to, you can reach out to me at growingguelph@gmail.com.